All right, parents, you want to know something wild and crazy and absolutely frustrating? 30% of antibiotics prescribed to kids are done so unnecessarily. Now, this is actually research from the CDC's website. So anytime you look at medical research about a medical intervention that we absolutely know is overused and misused, well, you got to understand it's probably a lot worse than the actual 30% number. And I've been in practice for nearly 2 decades specializing in pediatrics, and I can tell you it absolutely is. The amount of times that kids are put on antibiotics unnecessarily, and it's a huge deal. These are not just harmless substances like a multivitamin, like, oh, let's see if this works. Antibiotics, and we're going to go through it in this video, they have multiple issues with them. Individually for the kiddo, it absolutely disrupts their microbiome. It disrupts their gut, immune, and neurological. It even gets into the nervous system and wreaks havoc there. So a child who is prescribed antibiotics unnecessarily, and actually even necessarily, if it's a true bacterial infection, we know that every round of antibiotics increases their risk of repeated respiratory infections later on down the road, and actually increases their risk of autoimmune and chronic inflammatory diseases like asthma, allergies, and even obesity, ADHD, and anxiety. This is a big deal for the child who may be getting these antibiotics unnecessarily, and it's a big deal actually for all of us because of the rampant overuse of antibiotics, not only in humans, kids, but actually also in a whole other department with livestock. We now have this massive global issue with antibiotic resistance and superbugs. I'm not going to talk about that one so much in this video. We're really going to laser in, as we do with all of our content, on your child, your family. But this is a big deal, and I want to break down the science as to why antibiotics are misused and overused. Because first, in order to do that, we've got to say, well, what's really causing an ear infection or a respiratory infection or causing my kid to get sick in the first place? When you understand that, you will realize and see it's definitely not a lack of antibiotics. It's a neuroimmune, respiratory, I kind of like to call it just a plumbing and drainage dysfunction. And it's so easy to understand what's causing these respiratory infections, whether ear, sinus, throat, whatever it may be. It's really easy to understand that most of them, research has absolutely backed this up. For decades, we've known that the majority are viral, not bacterial. So no wonder they don't respond to antibiotics. And again, I got to say it one more time. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, which would be one thing if these were just harmless substances, but they're a big freaking deal for our kids' health. And they're a huge part of what we call the perfect storm, which is these early accumulated stressors that are causing our kids of this generation to have the highest rates of chronic illness that we've never seen. And this is a big factor and a big player in the rise of chronic illness as well. Well, I will not be doing just a whole video about stats and my frustration. I remember early on in my career, I opened up my practice in 2007, and just a year or two before that, this huge study had come out by the American Academy of Pediatricians. So again, take it with a grain of salt. They're doing research about their own work, right? And so they're going to want it to look how it is. But this one, they couldn't really church it up. They found that 85% of practicing pediatricians agreed that when it comes to ear infections, they should use a wait and see approach, since most of them are viral, most of them are temporary or transient, and the body will get over it and actually become stronger as a result of doing so itself. So 85% of pediatricians said, yep, that should be our clinical guideline and our standard. And back then, actually 10, 20 years ago, I don't remember the exact date. That doesn't matter. The context does. They actually adopted that policy. That is literally the guidelines that doctors are supposed to follow. Watch and wait and be very kind of patient and hold back antibiotics compared to what was done in the past. Now, there's been slight improvement in this place, but very little, because the study went on to find that very few, I think it was like 33% or 35% of those surveyed actually follow that guideline and policy. Now, how frustrating, how disheartening, and how real life is that for our current medical system, where they know what to do, or probably in this case, probably better said, know what not to do, but they still don't, right? Because that's what it is. It's a system. Individual doctors always, I think, know better, but the collective system, third-party payers, all that sort of stuff, they force forward this crap on our kids. So let's break down what's actually happening. Number one, when a child is exposed to antibiotics, and this is actually the case even if they are necessary, which I probably don't need to say this inside this video, but let me just say it for safety purpose sake. They save lives, y'all. Every single medical intervention. You leave me on a deserted island, I'd like some clean water, some way to start a fire and hunt some food, and then some antibiotics in case the food bites me and I get a bacterial infection from it. So the point is, antibiotics save lives, but they also, like every medical intervention and medication, they have side effects, and they are significant, and often they are severe. In fact, some kids have anaphylactic reactions to antibiotics and have lost their life. That's not being dramatic, that's being truthful. But the one we really want to talk about here first is the disruption of the gut microbiome and the gut-brain connection. Now, the way that God designed us is there's these key systems that run everything. The master control system by far, the boss, the mom of the body, is the brain and the nervous system. Now, the nervous system controls the gut, the immune system, inflammation, endocrine, all these sort of things, but everything crosstalks. And the gut and the immune system and the gut and the nervous system and brain, they really communicate with each other. So what antibiotics do is they get into the gut, and they not only, they're trying to kill the bad guys, but it's not a smart bomb. It wipes out everything. And it wipes out our good bacteria, which are already low in today's world because of birth interventions, a lot more births being C-section where we don't colonize the gut. And then we've just sprayed and killed antibiotics on pretty much everything. And so this is a big deal. Our kids already have compromised guts, and antibiotics get in there, disrupt the microbiome, and create what's called dysbiosis even more so. Now, this is strongly linked to everything from neurological conditions like autism, ADHD, and anxiety, but it's extra clearly linked to autoimmune conditions like allergies, asthma, obesity, PANDAS, PANS, and those sort of things. Now, the other thing that I mentioned there that the gut does is the gut connects to the brain. And the gut is where these very important neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine are created and absorbed. So when we disrupt the gut, we get our neurotransmitters out of balance, and that leaves our nervous system overstressed. The other thing that is connected there in the gut is something called the vagus nerve. And if you follow our content, our podcasts, our videos at all, we talk a lot about the vagus nerve, V-A-G-U-S, because it's the most important nerve in the body, and it is in charge of rest, relaxation, digestion, regulation of our emotions, our behavior, and our mood. And it's also in charge of regulating inflammation. So antibiotics get in there, they disrupt the gut, they disrupt the nervous system, they disrupt the vagus nerve, and it leaves the whole system, all those systems, more suppressed, more dysregulated, and more imbalanced every round of antibiotics. In fact, we know, especially if those antibiotics are given to a child under the age of 12 months and even more, and also under the age of 3, there's significant lifelong challenges that come with that. And it's a huge component in the rise of chronic illness. All right. So all of that is very true. There is science, there is links, there is research. You can go to our website, you can just go to the Google, and it will tell you all of this is true and has been for decades. We've known this. We've known that ear infections, sinus infections, respiratory infections are viral. We've known that we're overusing antibiotics and misusing antibiotics, and we've known that they create chronic health issues for that child and big issues of superbugs and antibiotic resistance for all of us. So what can we do different? You can take a path of care that addresses the root cause of these respiratory infections head on. And that's what neurologically-focused chiropractic care does. It's completely different than medicine, and we're not trying to treat the condition. We're not trying to suppress the symptoms, and we're not trying to do the job for the body either. Instead, what we're doing is we make adjustments to do these 3 things. Number 1, relax the stressed out nervous system. When our kids are what's called subluxated and they have all this tension and stress on their nervous system, especially in the neck, the traps, and the skull areas from birth, from forceps, from vacuum, from C-section, this is very common in kids today to have an overstressed, sensory overdrive, stuck nervous system. There's a huge connection between repeated ear infections and things like torticollis, plagiocephaly, colic, sensory issues, and ADHD and autism later on, because the neurology is the same. And it all comes from this overstressed, stuck, sensory overdrive, what's called sympathetic fight or flight system. That actually also limits drainage and plumbing. So I went into some advanced nerdy neurology there for a second with those big words. Now let me come back to my Iowa farmer terminology and tell you, ear infections, sinus infections, respiratory infections are primarily caused by poor plumbing. The way God designed us is when these nerves are working right, then the muscles and the joints work, right? And they move the eustachian tubes, they move the sinuses, they move our lymphatics, and they move our respiratory system. And all of this crud, whether it's a seasonal change or a little sister who brought home this bug and brought home this virus, when it gets in, it's supposed to get trapped in that mucus and in that lymphatic system, that plumbing, if you will, that fluid, if you will. And it's a brilliant, simple, also intricate design that we then drain that stuff from our ears, nose, throat, respiratory, lymphatic system into the stomach and into the gut. Remember that guy? And as long as the gut is working okay, and it's got probiotics, which are the good guys that kill the bad guys, and all sorts of other defense mechanisms of our immune system is inside the gut. So the way we're designed is we're supposed to just drain that stuff into the gut. The gut has the immune system, the Army, the Navy, the Marines. They kill everything off. They send it out into you know what. We'll leave the porcelain description out of this final component of the video. So chiropractic adjustments done in this way release the stress on the nervous system. Number one, they get fluid moving. Number two, and number three, the other thing we do as pediatric chiropractors is we help you understand the role of inflammatory foods and other lifestyle interventions. And in fact, we've created this entire incredible guide called our Kick the Sick or Nature's Medicine cabinet. This is how I take care of my kiddos. And I have 4 kiddos who I don't even know the number nowadays. It adds up to like 30 to 40 years of being a kid. Not a single ear, sinus, or respiratory infection, and not a single antibiotic or medication ever given to one of my kiddos. What's different? Were their eustachian tubes better, more vertical and drained easy? Were we genetically immune to respiratory infections? No. We got these adjustments to take care of the nervous system and get stress off it, number one, to promote drainage and plumbing when they would come home with a stuffy nose or the seasonal change or the sick kid sitting next to them at school. No big deal. It's not about being exposed to it. It's about getting over it. And then number 3, we live healthy. So if you need help learning more about how these chiropractic adjustments can get your sick, chronically sick, repeatedly sick kiddo healthy again without antibiotics, or keep your healthy kids ahead of this stuff so you never have to worry about antibiotics and medications wreaking havoc on their health, simply comment guide below and we'll send you a download of our Nature's Medicine cabinet and Kick the Sick guide. And you'll have everything we teach in this video and more right at your fingertips. Thanks for tuning in with this one. Please share it. If you know a family right now whose little one continues to struggle with ear and respiratory infections and they're put on multiple rounds of antibiotics, and maybe now you really know after this video about how big of a deal that is, please share this video with other parents. Please share it in Facebook groups. I know y'all got your crunchy granola moms of your community, your county, your region Facebook group that you're in. Pop this video and our resources in there because it's a real big deal that we stop overusing and misusing antibiotics in kids, because it doesn't even help them get over that viral infection in the first place, but it does lead to chronic long-term health consequences that are really not good. And we need to address all of this by sending families in a different direction, a completely different direction, the conventional pediatrician, urgent care, or immediate care. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing. See you on the next one.